We are back with another video, and once again, I am dressed like a Pokemon trainer, which means this video is gonna go straight down the tubes. No, but really, we got a pretty sweet camera in-house today. In-house? Whose house? My house? I don't even live in a house. We've got a pretty nice camera that we're gonna talk about today, and it's the Fuji GFX100S. Now, really, when I'm watching a camera review, the thing that I'm most interested in is just what does the image look like? What does the video look like? What do photos look like? So let's start with a footage reel and my photo samples before we ever get into me blabbering about my thoughts around it. Because if all you came here for was that, here you go. If you don't want to stick around after, totally cool. But if you do, I will share some of my thoughts on this camera. And I have some thoughts about this camera. No surprises, the GFX100S is a good camera. Like, nobody ever really thought that would not be the case. Now, the thing about this GFX100S is that it's a medium format camera. Not too long ago, we were talking about the original GFX100, which I tested the GF80mm f1.7 with, and I thought, wow, this is like insane. Just like having this large of a sensor and also having a camera with over 100 megapixels is just something kind of flabbergasting in itself. And really, it's one of those things where you don't really understand how it impacts your work until you actually have this camera in your hand and you're shooting with it. Now, you know, at the end of the day, like, I'm totally content and cool with shooting 12 megapixel photos with my phone. And for the most part, I don't really work or operate in a space that requires anything really more than that. You know, I've had shots that I've shot on 16 megapixel and 24 megapixels blown up, huge, even billboards, whatever. And I haven't had much problems. Where 100 megapixels becomes interesting, though, is just in detail. Like, when you're looking at an image, the photos that come out of this camera are really unparalleled in that regard. And for that, I think there's something absolutely special about medium format. And even on the video side, I think that, you know, that sense of scale that can come from medium format over full frame or smaller sensors is really interesting. I like the look of it. You're really starting to get into like an Alexa 65 or an IMAX camera if you want a similar look. Now, we knew that the GFX100 was already a wonderful camera. It was just big and obviously insanely expensive. It's a $10,000 camera. And so what Fuji has done is taken the kind of full frame market and said, hey, what if we made a full frame camera with a medium format sensor? Which honestly is super fascinating in itself. This whole idea that you're getting a camera in a form factor that is very similar to a full frame camera, even like a Canon 1DX kind of vibe. Like that to me is really interesting because, before we just always thought that medium format was too big, too expensive, and out of reach for most people. Now, this camera is still insanely expensive. It's a $7,000 camera in Canada, and most of the lenses are $2-3 grand on their own as well. So it's not like we've gone completely mainstream with medium format, but we've taken one step closer to this idea that medium format will be an attainable format for people to shoot with. And like that to me is the most exciting thing about this camera. But the reality is it's a fantastic camera that takes wonderful video and images, but the shooting experience of this camera, I just don't think it's there yet. We now live in a world where you have all these wonderful full frame cameras that shoot insanely fast autofocus for video and photos. They have all these modern amenities that we've become so used to from a shooting experience, in the sense that it's fast, it works well, there's no slowness to the experience, where I find with this GFX100S, although it feels good, it's probably one of the most ergonomic cameras I've ever held, the actual shooting experience itself, from the focus to the shutter, everything just feels slowed down. Now, for some people, you might absolutely love that. You like that analog kind of film feel. You're slowed down in your shooting. For me, especially when I'm shooting clients, I need something that works quick and reliably. Where I've found with the GFX100S, no matter what lens I put on this thing, it was constantly hunting a little bit before it would find focus. It also didn't matter what you put the shutter speed at. It always just felt clunky and slow as you're shooting. And so what I really think this camera is for, and who will actually really love it, is people that work in studios, people that have money to burn for 2 days in a studio shooting a fashion series with an assistant and a crew, and someone sitting at Capture One like pixel peeping their images after every single one to make sure eyes are in focus and whatnot. But if you're someone like me who's more of a solo shooter, who shoots Fuji, shoots Panasonic, shoots whatever, you will find yourself a bit frustrated with this camera. Now, I know I showed you some video from the GFX100S already, and that was more just me kind of street walking around stuff. Now, I want to show you some more kind of real world example if you're going to use this as your main video shooter. Maybe you're a commercial shooter or you're a videographer. So I'm going to cut to today's sponsor, which is MusicBed, and I shot this whole little MusicBed ad with the GFX100S to show you, hey, you can kind of use it in more controlled lighting, and it can be used if you really wanted to in a commercial environment. When I first started my YouTube channel, I thought actually filming my videos was going to be the most challenging part. But what you quickly realize once you get going is that the most difficult thing can be just finding music for your video. I use MusicBed for all of my videos because I love how I can listen to music on their iPhone and iPad apps on the go. But what truly sets MusicBed apart is their roster of amazing, authentic, and quality musicians. Trust me, this is not the stock music you've heard before. This is just good music you can easily license for your channel. Click the link in the description to sign up for MusicBed and use the code I'mPatrickT at checkout to get your first month free. Like I said in the earlier reel, the video is really nice from this camera. What I will say about Fuji video in general is like there is a bit of a digital feel to it that I find a little bit harder to get rid of. There's just a crispiness to the image from Fuji video. And F-Log is a great profile and whatnot, and it's cool that you can shoot with the film simulations, but the lenses also aren't really developed for video either. Like you'd have to get some Fujinon cine lenses for this thing to really unleash it. Like right now, focus by wire, totally shoddy on this camera. It just really wasn't a pleasant shooting experience, which I think is a little bit counter to the person I think Fuji wants buying this camera, because they're kind of marketing it as someone who would buy like a Sony A1 or a Canon R5 even. I really think Fuji wants you considering the GFX100S as your next like main camera, and I just don't think it's there yet. But I do think it's a huge leap forward for the system. It's almost like we have to take these little experimental risks with medium format before it actually does catch up to full frame or APS-C, whatever, to the point where they're just as fast to focus, they're just as easy to use, they're just as quick. The other side of it is the workflow. Like it's like computers and stuff have to catch up. Like Lightroom just crawled to a halt for me with these photos. It was fine in Capture One, but I know a lot of you use Lightroom, and I gotta be honest, like I have an M1 Mac Mini and it's a pretty half decent computer that I've thrown everything at. This is the first time I've really felt like it was struggling, and that was with Lightroom and the raw files from this camera. Like we're talking 200 megabyte plus raw files. You're gonna be chewing through SD cards, you're chewing through hard drives, just trying to organize and look at these photos. It's a whole chore in itself. So, I mean, is it worth it? Look, the images and the video, everything from this camera is fantastic, but is it worth it? I personally don't think so, especially not at $7,000. Like it seems like a weird prosumer camera, almost borderline consumer camera, but with a workflow that is extremely professional. Like I just don't see it fitting in my work. The last thing I want to say in terms of what I loved about this camera, and I kind of touched on it just very briefly, the ergonomics. I just hope that all Fuji cameras adopt this body style. I know we saw it with the XS10, but I'm really stoked to see like an XT5 at some point or an XH2 follow this same body style. Like this is where I think Fuji should be going. Like they still feel analog and they have a great shooting experience, but it just feels a little bit nicer in the hands with that deep grip. And I also love the top LCD and the fake analog controls. I know a lot of Fuji shooters that are probably watching this are like, well, what is he talking about? I love those analog controls. Hey, they're cool, but at the end of the day, they can be virtual. Give me the knobs and give me the dials, but give me screens on top so that they can be whatever I want them to be. When they're just stuck there in their analog, that's all they ever are. It's ISO, shutter speed, and exposure compensation. Like that can be a myriad of different things and it can adapt to how you're shooting. So I really love that top LCD and I want to see that come to more Fuji cameras. And I just love the body style itself, which I said when we had the XS10 too. I had actually asked Twitter about doing a Q&A about this camera at the end, but the more I think about it, it's like, I just don't even think it's worth having much more discussion about it. But that being said, like if you have comments or questions specifically that you'd like me to answer about this camera and the time that I've had with it, let me know in the comments and I'll definitely be there and we'll have a little chat about it. But in general, I just think the takeaway is it's a nice step forward. It's not quite there for me yet. I think a lot of people that love medium format are excited about this, and I think they're willing to put up with more compromises than I personally am, and I can understand that. Like there's times when even when I was in Micro Four Thirds that I just put up with stuff because of the price or because of I just like the camera itself. Like there's things that personally you probably would be okay with that I have an issue with, and like that's just sort of the way it goes with cameras now because they all are really good. It has to really nail so many things for you, the individual, to be the right camera. And for me, the 100S just doesn't nail those things. I just find it too slow. I find it too clunky and it's way too expensive. So for me, look, I like it. It's cool. Medium format definitely has a future and I don't want it to go away. And I really want to see Fuji keep innovating in this space. But as of right now, we still have some time to go. But my name is Patrick Tomasso. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, questions, comments, let me know in the comments. Questions, comments, let me know in the comments. Yeah, that made sense, Patrick. You're so good at these outros. Like you should just do this for a living instead of like actually have a real job and this being your hobby. Anyways, hey, thanks for watching. You're the best. You probably suck.